This story changed how everyone saw their town forever. My grandmother Eleanor left me one thing: a wooden box, rusted lock, and a note written in her shaking handwriting that said, "Open this when I'm gone, then decide if they're ready for the truth." I thought it would be recipes, old photographs, maybe the deed to some forgotten property. I was wrong. Inside that box were 43 letters, love letters. But not just any love story. These were written in 1965 in a town called Millbrook, Oklahoma, and they proved that the man whose statue stands in our town square, the man whose name is on our library, our high school, our everything, wasn't the hero we were taught to worship. He was a monster, and the people who helped him hide it, they're still here. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm 28 years old, and until 3 months ago, I hadn't set foot in Millbrook in 6 years. I left for Chicago the day after high school graduation, became a journalist, covered politics, corruption, the kind of stories that make people uncomfortable. I told myself I was chasing the truth. Really, I was running from this place. Then my grandmother died. Eleanor Morrison, 84 years old. Raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. She was the librarian at Millbrook Public Library for 40 years. Quiet, kind. The kind of woman who remembered every kid's birthday and always had the right book recommendation. At least, that's who I thought she was. I drove back to Millbrook on a Tuesday in late October. The kind of Oklahoma autumn day where the sky is too big and the wind smells like wheat and distant rain. Nothing had changed. Same brick buildings on Main Street. Same water tower with the fading Millbrook, population 4,200 painted on the side. Same statue of Judge Harrison Whitfield in the town square, his bronze hand raised like he was still giving orders from beyond the grave. I went to her house on Elm Street, yellow paint peeling, rose bushes she loved, now overgrown. And in her bedroom closet, behind shoe boxes and winter coats, I found the box. 43 letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. The return address on every envelope: Thomas Whitfield, Austin, Texas. Thomas Whitfield, Judge Whitfield's son. I knew the name. Everyone in Millbrook did. Tommy Whitfield was the golden boy who left town in 1966 and never came back. The official story? He went to college, got a job in Texas, started a new life. The letters told a different story. I sat on Eleanor's porch that night, reading by the yellow glow of her old porch light. The first letter was dated March 14th, 1965. My dearest Eleanor, I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see Marcus's face. I see what my father did. And I see you, standing in the library that day, looking at me like you knew. Like you always knew. You were the only one who saw me, not Judge Whitfield's son, not the boy with the future already written. Just Tommy, scared, lost, in love with a girl I wasn't supposed to love. I stopped reading, stared out at the dark street. Marcus Washington. I knew that name too. Every kid in Millbrook learned it in history class. In 1965, Marcus Washington, a 19-year-old black man, was arrested for stealing from the Whitfield estate. Judge Whitfield himself presided over the trial. Marcus got 20 years, died in prison in 1978. The history books called it justice. The letters called it something else. My father framed him, Tommy wrote. Marcus wasn't stealing. He found the books, the real accounts. The money my father was taking from the town fund, the contracts he was giving to his friends. Marcus was going to expose him. So my father planted evidence, used his power, destroyed a man's life to protect his own. And Eleanor? She knew. She'd found Tommy crying in the library stacks the day after Marcus was arrested. He'd told her everything, and she'd kept his secret. Kept it for 60 years. Why? The next letter answered that. I wanted to tell the truth, Tommy wrote. I wanted to stand up in court and say what my father did. But you begged me not to. You said they'd destroy me, destroy us. And you were right, weren't you? Look what happened anyway. I left because I couldn't look at that statue anymore. I left because every time I walked down Main Street, I saw Marcus's mother sweeping the porch of their house, and I knew I was a coward. I left because I loved you, Eleanor, and I couldn't bear to watch them make you pay for my silence. I read all 43 letters that night. By the time I finished, the sun was coming up, and I understood something terrifying. My sweet, quiet grandmother had been at the center of the biggest scandal in Millbrook history, and she'd taken it to her grave. Or she'd tried to. I needed to know if it was true. If Judge Whitfield, our town's founding father, the man whose face was on the welcome sign, had really framed an innocent man and let him die in prison. I went to the one place that might have answers. Millbrook Public Library, and that's where I saw her again. Sarah Chen. We'd been friends in high school. She was the smartest person I knew, the girl who read 3 books a week and still managed to be kind to everyone. We'd lost touch after I left. She'd gone to OU, got her library science degree, and come back home. Jake Morrison, she said, looking up from the front desk. Her dark hair was shorter now, and she wore glasses that made her look even more like the librarian she'd become. But her smile was the same. I heard about Eleanor. I'm so sorry. Thanks, I said. And then, because I didn't know how to make small talk when my whole world was tilting, I need to see the archives from 1965, the Marcus Washington trial. Her expression changed, just for a second. A flicker of something. Recognition? Fear? Why? She asked quietly. I told her about the box, the letters, Tommy Whitfield. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she stood up, walked to the door, and flipped the sign to closed. Sarah, my grandmother knew Marcus, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She was friends with his mother. Everyone in Millbrook's black community knew the trial was rigged. But nobody could prove it. Judge Whitfield controlled everything. The police, the newspaper, the court records. She led me to the basement, pulled out boxes I don't think anyone had touched in decades. We couldn't prove it then, she said. But maybe we can now. We spent 3 days in that basement, Sarah and me, reading microfilm, comparing records, cross-referencing dates, and slowly, piece by piece, we built the case that Tommy Whitfield had described in his letters. The bank records that didn't match the official accounts, the witness statements that were never entered into evidence, the alibi for Marcus that was never investigated. The judge's private journal, yes, we found it, hidden in a box of discarded municipal records, where he wrote about needing to remove the obstacle before Marcus could spread his lies. It was all there, 60 years of buried truth, sitting in a library basement. And then someone found out we were looking. It was a Thursday night. Sarah had just gone home. I was locking up Eleanor's house when the sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway. Sheriff Bill Crawford, 52 years old, built like a linebacker gone soft. His family had been in Millbrook for 5 generations, and his grandfather had been Judge Whitfield's deputy in 1965. "Evening, Jake," he said, leaning against his car. The streetlight caught his badge. "Heard you're back in town. Sorry about your grandmother." "Thanks, Bill. Also heard you've been spending a lot of time at the library, digging into old records." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. History can be tricky, easy to misread things, take them out of context. "I know what I'm reading." "Do you?" He pushed off the car, took a step closer. "See, Millbrook has a good thing going. Low crime, good schools, property values holding steady. People are proud of this town, proud of its history. Now, I'm not saying Judge Whitfield was perfect, but he built this place, gave people jobs, stability. You start dragging his name through the mud, you don't just hurt his memory. You hurt everyone who lives here." "Marcus Washington lived here too," I said. "He didn't get stability, he got prison, he got death." Crawford's jaw tightened. "That was a long time ago. Different times." "You stir this up, Jake. You're not going to find the welcome mat out. For you or for that librarian friend of yours. Sarah's family has been through enough, don't you think?" It wasn't subtle. It was a threat, wrapped in small-town politeness. He got back in his cruiser, rolled down the window. "Some boxes are meant to stay closed, son. Your grandmother understood that. Be smart. Be like her." He drove away. I stood in the dark, my hand shaking. Not from fear, from rage. Because he was wrong. Eleanor didn't keep the box closed. She left it for me. She wanted the truth to come out. She'd just been too afraid to do it herself. And now I had to decide. Was I going to be as scared as she was? As Tommy was? Or was I going to finish what they started? I called Tommy Whitfield. He was 86 years old, living in a retirement community in Austin. When I told him who I was, he was silent for so long I thought he'd hung up. "Eleanor's grandson," he finally said. His voice was thin, trembling. "She told me about you, in her last letter. She said you were brave, braver than we ever were." "I found the letters," I said. "All of them. I know what happened to Marcus. I know what my grandmother knew, and I want to tell the truth. But I need your help." He cried on the phone. 60 years of guilt and grief, pouring out of an old man who'd spent his whole life running from a town that worshipped his father. "I'll come," he said. "It's time." The Millbrook Town Council meeting was held on the first Monday of November. Standing room only. Word had spread. Sarah had made sure of that. Mayor Doris Whitfield, Tommy's younger sister, sat at the head of the table. She was 79, sharp as a tack, and she'd ruled Millbrook politics for 30 years. Her expression when she saw Tommy walk in was something I'll never forget. Shock. Then something else. Relief, maybe. Or the beginning of grief. "Tommy," she whispered. He walked to the podium, 86 years old, leaning on a cane, his hands shaking, but his voice was steady. "My name is Thomas Whitfield," he said, "and my father was not a good man." The room went silent. He told them everything. The embezzlement, the frame-up, Marcus Washington's innocence, how he'd wanted to speak up, but he'd been young and scared and in love with a girl who was trying to protect him from his own courage. Then I stood up, read from the letters, showed the documents Sarah and I had found, the bank records, the hidden journal, the evidence that had been buried in a library basement for 6 decades. And then I said the thing that changed everything. Judge Whitfield didn't just destroy Marcus Washington. He destroyed my grandmother, too. She spent 60 years carrying this secret. 60 years of silence. 60 years of watching this town celebrate a man who ruined lives. And in the end, she couldn't speak the truth herself. So she left it to me. I looked around the room, at the faces I'd grown up with, at Sarah, standing by the door, tears on her cheeks, at Sheriff Crawford, red-faced and furious in the back row. Millbrook isn't great because of Judge Whitfield, I said. It's great despite him. It's great because of people like Eleanor Morrison, who kept loving this town even when it broke her heart. It's great because of Marcus Washington, who died for a truth nobody wanted to hear. And it's great because of Tommy Whitfield, who finally found the courage to come home. I sat down. The silence lasted forever. Then someone started clapping. An old woman in the front row, Mrs. Henderson, who'd taught me 3rd grade. Then another person. Then another. Mayor Whitfield stood up. Her hands were shaking. "I move," she said, her voice cracking, "that we remove my father's statue from the town square, and that we rename the library after Eleanor Morrison, and that we establish a scholarship in memory of Marcus Washington." The vote was unanimous. That was 3 months ago. The statue came down in December. It wasn't angry, like you see in other towns. It was quiet, respectful. The whole town showed up. Tommy Whitfield was there, holding my arm, watching his father's legacy finally end. The Eleanor Morrison Public Library opened its new wing in January. The Marcus Washington Archive, where anyone can read the truth about what happened. Sarah runs it. She's already helped 3 other families research histories they thought were lost. Tommy moved back to Millbrook, bought a small house on Maple Street. He comes to the library every Tuesday, sits in Eleanor's favorite chair. Sometimes he cries, sometimes he smiles. Mostly, he just sits there. Finally home. As for me, I stayed. I write for the Millbrook Gazette now. Small stories, local news. The kind of thing I used to think was beneath me. But I'm learning that the biggest truths aren't always in Chicago or Washington. Sometimes they're in a library basement, in a box of old letters, in the eyes of a girl you knew in high school who grew up to be braver than you ever imagined. Sarah and we're taking it slow. Dinners at the diner, walks by the creek, long conversations about books and justice and whether it's possible to love a place that hurt you. I think it is. I think that's the whole point. My grandmother loved Millbrook enough to protect its secrets. But she loved it even more to want it to be better, to leave that box, to trust that someone someday would have the courage she couldn't find. I hope I earned that trust. So that's the story, the one that changed how everyone in Millbrook saw their town forever. Maybe you have a Millbrook too, a place with a history that doesn't match the monuments, people with secrets that need air, truths that are waiting for someone brave enough to speak them. I hope this reminds you that the real heroes aren't the ones with statues. They're the ones who keep the letters, who sit in basements with boxes of evidence, who love someone even when it's dangerous, who finally find the courage to say, "This is what really happened, and we deserve better." Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Good luck out there. Whatever truth you're chasing, whatever box you're afraid to open, I hope you find the strength to unlock it. The world needs more people who do. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about the places and people in your own life, stick around, subscribe, hit the bell, because there are more stories like this.